All right, hello everyone. This particular chapter is dealing with, or this module I should say, is dealing with policing, crime control, and technology. Now, the reason why it's an important topic in a course that's dealing with crime and justice in the urban community is because policing is such a major part of just about every city that we have here in the United States and worldwide too, but we're going to focus here on the US. And the role of a policing agency within a particular jurisdiction, within a particular municipality or city is a significant one. They are relied upon for law and order. They are relied upon for traffic. They're relied upon to respond to a call for assistance, a call for help, potentially a medical emergency. They're relied upon in many cities now with significant budget constraints that are out there. They're relied upon for um, to act as crossing guards, to help with the schools when they're getting out with the students and the safety of the children. Now, these aren't typical roles of law enforcement. In fact, most officers would say, "Hey, I didn't sign up to be a crossing guard." But guess what? You're needed for that, and your particular jurisdiction, your municipality, has a shortage of crossing guards. So it's part of the services that officers generally are called upon in some cities. Now, the point that I want to bring up about crime control and technology is as technology improves, it allows law enforcement to have more and more assets, more and more opportunities to solve crime, maybe to stop or prevent crime, to manage the department with various shifts that are required. And by embracing some of this new technology, it helps with solvability. It helps trying to catch the individuals that are responsible, especially for the violent crime. I'm not necessarily speaking about crime control technology for very minor offenses or for disorderly persons offenses. No, we're talking about crimes, and the crimes are the ones that are very heavily victim orientated. They are hurting people, sexual assaults, the robberies, the attempted murders, the murders, the drive-by shootings where tragically so many innocent people get harmed. That's where this technology really can be useful to law enforcement because it can allow an agency potentially to clear a lot of cases that they would not have cleared previously. And that's the goal here, is to bring crime down and make, as we saw in the previous module, make the quality of life of the individuals who live in a particular community in an urban setting enjoy a positive experience, a positive quality of life. The goal and dream that everyone has to raise a family peacefully and to give your children opportunities that exists throughout our urban areas, our suburban areas, and our rural areas. No one particular area should be excluded from the quote unquote American dream. Proactive policing. So this is something, and I teach a policing course that we go over a lot. This is a better model than just reactive policing. Reactive means if crime occurs, police get called and they respond, try to catch who done it, right? Talk to the victim, talk to witnesses, and go out there searching for a suspect. Proactive policing is taking an approach where we're not waiting for crime to happen. We're going to try to stop crime. We're going to be proactive here. We're going to make certain efforts to detect and apprehend, to prevent the drug sales, to prevent the overdoses by stopping the drugs as much as we can, identifying where they're packaged, identifying who all the players are, doing wiretap investigations, as we've seen from previous modules. This particular strategic approach encompasses all strategies aimed to prevent and or reduce crime. Goal of law enforcement. Should be a goal of society too. That's why a lot of times I share the articles on defunding the police. It's a point of view that should be analyzed and looked at. There is some value in terms of some of the criticisms that were levied against law enforcement. Surely, around the time that George Floyd was killed, and some of the efforts or lack thereof of community policing. But to think that we could get rid of the police and deal with crime, I mean, is really not being honest. Because without law enforcement, what's the incentive to follow the law, right? We're assuming that anyone out there who was considering committing crime or engaged in the commission of a crime would now miraculously abandon that commission of an offense just because we disbanded the police or we defunded them. I think what you'll have is a some situations of like a purge-like scenario, right? Like the horror movie that's out there, where there are no laws, there are no law enforcement. It's just anybody doing whatever they want because there's no ramifications. These are not reactive in terms of focusing primarily on uncovering ongoing crime, investigating, and responding to crime once they've occurred. Not reactive. So this is not about dealing with crime that has occurred already. This is trying to stop it, trying to reduce it through a lot of different efforts. And that's why, in many ways, proactive policing should be lauded. It should be something that is sought by departments because it allows, you're never going to be able to eliminate any aspects of reactive, all aspects of reactive policing because you got to react to the calls of service for service. But if you are able to up your approach through technology and through other efforts for proactive policing, the goal would be to reduce that volume of crime, to bring it down. And if we bring it down, then the potential for harm for society has been lessened, and that should be a goal. Proactive policing strategies are not isolated programs used by a select group of agencies, but rather a set of ideas that have spread across the profession of policing. President Obama back in 2014, and I read a book recently, 2 weeks ago, on policing, dealing with a lot of major issues in urban policing and dealing specifically with the experience of black police officers and how they are treated out in society and how they are treated within the department. A phenomenon known as double marginality, where basically an African American police officer feels pressure from the community that they are a sellout by joining the police. That should never happen, but it does. And secondly, they feel discrimination within the department by other officers who look down upon them and treat them differently because they're black. Double marginality. So, if we want to look at some of the numbers on why black recruitment of officers is down, one of the symptoms is this double marginality, and we have to address it. It's got to be dealt with. Barack Obama, when he was president, did that through this establishment of the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing. I think I have the document posted up. If not, I'll track it down. But it is a very powerful document, a very powerful program. And what President Obama was trying to do is say, let's take what we were doing in the past, take the positive parts of it, the things that are working, but identify the things that aren't working and change it. Right? Change only comes about when we push things. Uh, Putting tariffs on the imported goods because countries that we export to put tariffs on our goods. Boy, it's disruptive, but it's the only thing that may motivate change when it comes to economic perspective. So we have to be very mindful of this. The task force was 11 members in number, created on December 18th, 2014, and created in response to several incidents between law enforcement and the communities that are charged to protect and serve. Really, at the heart of 21st century policing is the embodiment of community policing, strong ties to the community by law enforcement, that kind of relationship where both sides rely on each other, not in antagonism of each other, and therefore you foster this sense of cooperation. It's the only way you're going to be able to deal with some of the intelligence that you need to develop to address who's committing crimes, and how you approach it. So very, very important. Some policing strategies: predictive policing, anticipating future crimes, using technology, using data, using crime mapping, right? I love crime mapping because it really brings out in the geography and topography of a particular locale where are all the crimes occurring, where are the hotspots. We can begin to discover why. We can begin to deal with those issues with redeployment and maybe some new technologies like license plate reading devices or cameras, or I've seen in New York City robot dogs and robots, right? So, uh, I don't think we're there yet because I'm still thinking that potentially this is a little Terminator type stuff. So I don't want any of that stuff to occur. But look, it's getting there. In London, one of the reasons why they're so successful in terms of the deployment of the bobbies of the London Metropolitan Police Force is because their cameras are number one all over the place. They cover a tremendous amount of square footage of London and the surrounding areas. But number two, those cameras are often interactive. The officers monitoring them, have the ability to speak out to individuals who are, in the process of stealing a car. Stop, you in the blue jacket. Stop stealing that car. Officers have been dispatched, or bobbies have been dispatched. So crime mapping, very, very important using geographic information systems. The NYPD does a great job of this. I have to work more off their website and get more of their information because it really is great. Using CompStat, computer statistics, not waiting for the data to get old, right? Using that data as it's being developed on a weekly basis. So not sitting there saying, okay, we're going to react to the rapes that were occurring a year ago. No, that rapist has moved on to a new locale. He or she, mostly he, is going to change in order not to get caught. So if we are able to act immediately, let's catch that rapist. Let's eliminate him from the streets. Let's put him in prison for the rest of his life and then some. I got no problem doing that because what they're doing is absolutely horrific. Excuse me. Broken windows theory. We studied that, the quality of life, the smaller offenses, and how it impacts an individual in a community, how the community itself sends out that signal that it's okay to commit crime. It attracts crime. And broken windows policing addresses those minor issues and say those minor issues are building blocks to larger issues. And I've reviewed broken windows for many, many years. I've read a lot of the studies on it in literature, and I know it's controversial. Half of the people support it, half the people do not, but I am a fan of broken windows because I think it does work. GPS technology, smartphones, and social media so important, right? Without smartphones, I don't know if we'd be able to solve half the things we are able to solve in law enforcement, including call logs and cell phone tower dumps that record all the lines, camera usage, GPS systems, license plate reader technology, GPS tracking devices, all of this cutting edge technology that can aid law enforcement. Some of the advantages can be used 24 hours a day. It decreases your dependency upon manpower. Your computer's doing the monitoring for you, and you get a data spreadsheet the next morning. So it saves departments overtime because let's be real, a department has a budget, and included in that budget is overtime. And the officers there, they're working and they're rightfully collecting that overtime, but that dries up real quick. I mean, I've had experiences during my career where the overtime budget that's supposed to last a year is gone by April the 1st. And it's not an April Fool's situation. Now, what do you do? So, this technology helps. Monitoring offenders, a lot of times they put an ankle bracelet on them, especially for parole, as we're going to see. OnStar technology, just like the car. Text messages. I can't tell you how many murder cases were solved based on text messages, right? Pictures and videos from smartphones, all of these things, very, very important. New technology of crime prevention, look at hard technology and soft technology. Hard technology, CCTV, the cameras all over the place, predominantly in London, as I said, predominantly, but more and more, in Patterson, my old jurisdiction, we were up to, right when I retired, around 40. The goal was to get up to well over 100. Why? Because those are the eyes of law enforcement, especially when witnesses are reluctant to come forward out of a fear of retaliation. Street lighting, very important. Replacing a street light that went out may save people from being robbed. I mean, that's a solution that you think wouldn't impact necessarily crime, but it does. Criminals overwhelmingly aren't stupid. They're doing bad things. They're not stupid. If it's a dark area with no streetlights, what's the chances of them being discovered? Right? They're not going to be picked up by the cameras. They're not going to be seen by eyewitnesses. Citizen protection devices, mace and tasers. Mace is very, very popular in the keychain format. Um, I think it's vital to carry around uh, tools like that if it's legal in your jurisdiction. Right? The tasers, a lot of jurisdictions they don't allow citizens to carry tasers, but some do. Metal detectors, just about every high school and middle school in the area has them. Ignition interlock systems for drunk drivers, these are important. Instead of taking the drunk driver's license away and then they lose a job, and who knows, maybe that complicates their addiction, and maybe that causes them to lose their house or their apartment. The law has changed drastically where they're being allowed to keep their license if they install an interlock ignition device. And this device, it's a tube that connects to the ignition, and it's connected to a computer, and the computer records the data. And when you start up the car, you have to blow into the tube, and it won't start if there's any alcohol in the person's system. And about every 20 minutes along the way, it calls for another breath sample. So the tube is there, you breathe into it. If there's any alcohol detected, it shuts the car down and it notifies the court that you are in violation of that particular order, and then that person can and will most likely lose their license. So, looking at this, the soft technology threat assessment instruments, bullying identification protocol, sex offender registration, very important. Monitoring based on tiers, where the sex offenders are, what type of risk are they at committing a new offense, at recidivism. Risk assessment prior to involuntary civil commitment. If you're a risk because of a mental health issue and you've not improved and your term supervising you is over because that's what you faced when you were found not guilty by reason of insanity, instead of releasing that person who's not well and is a danger to themselves and others, they are civilly committed in a hospital setting to get better, hopefully. But if not, they'll remain there indefinitely. Profiling software to identify suspicious persons, dangerous, right? Is there a bias that's being used in the algorithm? Facial recognition technology is, controversial in some areas because they say it targets one race over another, one gender over another, an age range over another, whatever the identifiable feature or characteristic is. And that may be then used in a way that is inappropriate. Policing new technology, hard technology, improved police protection, vests in cars, always improving. Improved new weapons, less than lethal devices are in that. Even their firearms, even their shotguns. All of those improvements in terms of ease of use, lack of jamming, making sure that those tools are available. God forbid if the officer's involved in a situation where he needs to use a deadly force and that gun is jammed. Took the life of a New Jersey State Trooper, Scott Gonzalez. When he was in a gun battle, he went to go use the gun, and the gun jammed on him, and he got killed by the perpetrator. Turned out that a lot of New Jersey troopers were experiencing problems with that particular gun, and they went ignored. Their complaints went ignored, and it cost the life of Trooper Gonzalez. Computers in squad cars, you'll see them all the time. It's like a laptop. They're able to look up license plates and driving information and criminal histories and bulletins and get updates instantly from headquarters. Hands-free patrol car control, known as Project 54. So it's a Tesla kind of style car with autonomous driving. Offender and citizen IDs via biometric and fingerprints. This is new. All right, so this is what they're trying to do as we move towards real IDs, have full biometrics. Somewhat controversial too. Gunshot location devices known as ShotSpotter. Getting the police there fast, ASAP. As I saw, it's soft technology, crime mapping, hotspots, crime analysis through CompStat. Criminal history data systems enhancement, knowing what a person, a target's criminal history is. If there's somebody who resists arrest, you have to be prepared because that person, when it comes time to arrest him or her, is going to be somebody who most likely will resist again. If you're doing a search warrant and they have in the past been convicted for shooting someone or been convicted of a weapons offense, well, then their likelihood is that you're going to encounter a weapon during the execution of the search warrant. So you have to be prepared for that. You have to anticipate that. Sharing information within criminal justice system and private sector, that happens from time to time, and CCTV police applications, certainly in London and more here in the States. Institutional corrections, hard technology, contraband detection devices. I think I posted a video of Rikers and what they do to detect contraband. It's incredible. Duress alarm systems for the officers, language translation devices. I see this in court all the time. Instead of hiring interpreters, they have a service that they call in. So if you get somebody who speaks, Farsi, instead of hiring a Farsi interpreter all day long, which can cost the courts $500 at least, they have a service and they get paid for the rate, and it's much more feasible in terms of the cost. Remote monitoring, perimeter screening, less than lethal force in prison, prison design options, the expansion of supermax prisons, the Jeremy Bentham in his Panacoptian design. So now they're expanding it. Recently, I saw the Supermax prison in El Salvador, where many individuals are being deported to that are believed or understood to be members of the MS-13 gang. Whether they are or they aren't, I guess that's subject to hearings, and I don't know if we're going to have those hearings or not. So it's a very interesting time that we have. But that Supermax prison in El Salvador, and there was another one that was in Colombia. Um, they have a group of well over 150 inmates in one area with multiple tiers of bunks, 5 rows or so, and that's how they do nothing all day, and that's how they approach incarceration in those countries. Segregation units also very controversial, putting individuals in. Um, it's known as putting them in the box. By segregating them, you're putting them in an area for punishment purposes, solitary confinement, and it has a deleterious effect upon their mental health. Soft technology, using simulations as training tools, mock riots, facial recognition software. New inmate classification helps put the inmates in the areas that they need to be in. Risks of escape, or potentially that the inmate could be abused. Um, Prison analysis, offenders, gangs, hotspots within the prison, info sharing with police, community victims, community-based corrections for reentry. All of this is an improvement of the information quality that can assist the Department of Corrections. Community corrections, hard technology, GPS is a huge part of this one. They release an inmate onto a halfway house, they put an anklet bracelet on them. And it's expensive to monitor, but it's cheaper than incarcerating. Breathalyzers, instant drug tests. I see this in probation all the time, where they have somebody they suspect on drugs and they take an instant test with a urine analysis. Polygraphs, not used as much as they once were, not as favored as they once were. Lie detector tests, laptops for line staff. It seems silly, but that's a huge technology improvement. GPS for staff location, knowing where your officers are at all times. Some officers don't realize that inside patrol cars they have GPS monitoring devices to know where they are and the speed that they're going. And I saw an officer get fired out of a jurisdiction because he was routinely going above 75 or 80 miles an hour in an area that was a business area, a mixed-use area, a two-lane highway, but the speed limit was 50. By doing 75, 80 miles an hour during the day, it's dangerous. So he was creating a danger to the public. Soft technology, new classification devices for sex, drugs, and various offenders. workload software treatment technology, all trying to help people with their addictions, info sharing with community police and treatment providers. Directed patrol. Now, unlike reactive, here we're directing patrol. Unlike proactive, where we're just sending them out with an idea to hotspots, here we are giving much more focus to law enforcement. Police are giving specific areas in which to spend their patrol time. Usually high crime areas. They use geographic information systems, crime mapping, taking crimes and mapping them out to identify specific geographic patterns to times. And those times, pattern to crimes, those patterns may be different depending upon the time frame of the day. You know, if you want to look at a pattern of criminal activity around 3 a.m., it's around where the bars are getting out. Because people have had alcohol and now they're ready to fight. Methods help police maximize their patrol time by concentrating their efforts in high crime areas. Aggressive patrol, when a police department is directed to make numerous traffic stops and field interrogations, usually rewards departments with many arrests for minor and serious offenses. It brings up revenue. Those arrests, result in fines, and those fines come back to municipalities. So sometimes aggressive patrol is a dollar mission. The more arrests we make, the better off financially we're going to be. A field interrogation is when an officer stops someone they find suspicious and asks questions of that person. Surveillance cameras, hugely important. Not a violation of your rights. You don't have a right to privacy to be in public. Now, they can't take a camera and spin it and put it into your bedroom window and find out what's going on up there. If you're committing a crime or not, no, of course not. Then you're invading into people's private areas. But the public domain is fine. There is no expectation of privacy. This helps solve a lot of cases. And I can tell you, I've seen on YouTube myself many individuals who um, solve crimes based upon clues that are out there. They have a clip of some type of video and they play it over and over again. And they call them YouTube sleuths. They come together and they solve crime. Law enforcement will take crime being solved anywhere from anyone. Evidence-based policing, patrol innovations, using evidence to help the mission. So here, scientific research could provide very useful information. Let go of the traditional wisdom and try something new. This is best practices from some of the research that is out there. Monitor and evaluate the projects. Don't wait till they're too old. Monitor and evaluate as you're going along. Use the science, use the data, get the information back. Share that information with other agencies. Scientific, not criminal evidence. Police organization and field ops. DNA, hugely important. If I had DNA in an investigation and it matched the suspect, uh, game over. Right? You don't need much more proof than that. Right? That's going to go a very long way. So the genetic blueprint or code for every living organism. CODIS, what we would call a CODIS hit. We'd find a droplet of blood at a crime scene, put it to the lab, and it would take months and months. On CSI or on Law and Order, they have the results in like before the next commercial, 3 minutes. That's not reality. Right? It takes a very long time to develop the DNA because of everything else that's in there. But we get an alert from the lab, a CODIS hit, saying, hey, that blood came back to John Doe. Well, John Doe becomes our suspect. If we find John Doe, we're going to ask John Doe to confirm his DNA. We're going to want to swab his cheek to get his cells. And John Doe can tell us yes, or John Doe can say no. If he says no, we can get an order from a judge, hopefully what's known as an investigative detention order, to swab it forcibly. So we explain that to them, and then usually once you explain to somebody, you can either give it to us by consent or we can get an order. Most of the time, people are going to say, all right, I'll give it to you by consent. A database, the coded database, stores everybody's information. A lot of times, if somebody's arrested for a crime, they're swabbed and put into the database. So that database is huge. New developments, touch DNA. Just touching something can leave a trace of DNA. Family searches using Ancestry.com or 23andMe those genetic services. A lot of times that will uncover a, a cold case and uncover who the killer is. DNA fog, genetic witnesses, all of these things are important. I saw a study once that used DNA and they kept on mapping it and mapping it to general areas where they believed the DNA came from based upon familial DNA. It was a fascinating, true story, and it took place in Europe, and it started in Holland, and kept on expanding and expanding and expanding. And it's actually on Netflix or one of those services, and it was fascinating. They were able to find and solve a killing, a senseless killing of a young boy and a woman through that DNA map approach. It was quite fascinating. All right, this is a great little thing here about unlocking evidence in DNA. Deoxyribonucleic acid. Now, you can say that at a party this weekend. If somebody says, "What'd you learn this week in college?" You can say, "Well, in my urban justice course, crime and justice in the urban community, I learned about deoxyribonucleic acid." People be like, "Oh my God, what is that?" You'll say, "That's what we call DNA." Right? Very, very impressive. Through DNA profiling, a process explained here, forensic scientists test DNA samples to see if they match a DNA profile of a known criminal or other test subject. Uh, and then it goes through the process. One, DNA samples, various sources. Two, extracting the DNA, and then putting it through their system to get DNA fragments. Now, number three, another set of enzymes added to the separate DNA. They make a DNA fingerprint, and then four, crime lab technicians look at 13 points of identifiers called markers, compare them, and then determine whether they are convinced. If they convince, they'll never say that they are absolutely certain. They will say something like, the match is one in every 5 trillion people. We don't have 5 trillion people on the earth, so it's damn well certain. And you can see here, the little card that they get, the computer printout with all the different markers that they analyze. An evidence collection bag, we seal it with tape to make sure that it doesn't become contaminated. And lastly, they use a lot of microscopes. They are great witnesses, great scientists, and very, very helpful to law enforcement. All right, everybody, technology is here to stay for law enforcement. You have to embrace it, and you have to be mindful that it changes rapidly. So you have to keep it on the horizon. All right, take care, everyone. Be well.